This podcast contains explicit language.
And spoilers. Only if you suck.
Hello, listeners, and welcome to Two Fat Guys Talk Games. This is Carlos, and today's episode is going to be a trifecta of three different things. Basically, we recorded an episode with friends, and we tried out Mumble, and its recording feature kind of screwed us, along with my own stupidity, which left us with only half of the episode. Before we play that half of the episode, I want to let you all know that tonight, as in right now, January 31st, there is a donation drive going on for people to get... Well, it's a donation drive for breast cancer research, but the winner of the drive, well, basically, their chosen game as the 8th game at EVO 2013, or EVO, because apparently saying it EVO is criminal in some circles. The games in question that well, there are a whole bunch of them. If you check the podcast text, which you can do in your podcast aggregator in the info section, or if you're watching this on YouTube, or rather listening to it on YouTube, you can check the video description. There are links there that lead to the 86th stream, where they are, by the time you're listening to this, should be doing a live stream of Skullgirls to raise money for the donation drive to get Skullgirls into that 8th slot. There's also a link where you can donate. If you're a poor bastard like me and you can't really donate, not that I can't donate, I did, but if you really can't, spread the word. If you can, by all means, do donate to get Skullgirls, the most deserving of the listed fighters, onto the EVO stage. You'll also be doing a service to women who are affected by breast cancer, whether they have it now or have had it, or could potentially have it. I'm a cancer survivor myself. I had testicular cancer, so supporting cancer research is a good cause all around. To put it into perspective, its competition is from Super Smash Bros. Melee and Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo. The Melee being a Smash Bros. Game and therefore kind of bleh, and Super Turbo being the inferior version of David Sirlin's awesome HD remix. Those three games, Skullgirls amongst them, are basically leading the donation drive. Either all of them are in the 5 figures, and I strongly recommend you donate to Skullgirls. And hang on, I am getting a psychic transmission from Dave, who is currently fighting the alien overlord Zorflax in the Centauri Nebulosis sector, and I'm going to psychically relay it here.
Hey guys, this is Dave. Definitely would encourage you to donate towards the Skullgirls donation drive to get it played at EVO. Because as we all know, between it and Persona 4, those are really the only two good games that are being played. If you're not a fan of Street Fighter bullshit, please donate to the Skullgirls drive so we can get that played. Dave out.
And that was Dave, no doubt because of the mind-affecting powers of whatever the hell I just mentioned. Didn't realize that it was competing against Melee as well. I'm sure that that's what he meant to say, do not worry. Thank you, David. May you return safely for our next episode. And with that out of the way, here's the half of the episode that we managed to record. I'll be back after with some snippets and doodads from a bunch of recording sessions Dave and I did that never made it to episodes. Enjoy! Alright, this is Carlos!
This is Dave.
Two Fat Guys Talk Games, episode 28, where we have friends on the show. Say hello, friends.
Hello, friends!
Awesome. That is good to hear. Today we are recording this podcast through Mumble. So if there's any unusualities, let us know. Or if the whole cast is even better than before, let us know. Today's topic, we have two. We have games we wish were easier or harder, which may translate into a discussion onto game difficulty as a whole, and game packaging. Games and game packaging. That is what modern gaming is all about. And in the pre-game conversation, for the pre-show conversation we were having, I should say, we were talking about games that took pity on you and lowered your difficulty because they thought you sucked. Perhaps let's start off with that. Dave, have you played such a game, and did you love it?
Ninja Gaiden comes to mind, and no.
Why didn't you like it? I haven't played a game that does that to me, but I don't think that's a horrible thing.
No. Difficulty in games, I think we're kind of on a multi-tangent conversation on this one, because Ninja Gaiden and the games like it, they have dog mode where you get things way easier, but ultimately, I don't believe a game should be so hard right from the get-go that they have to actually introduce a mode called dog mode. Isn't that just playing down your audience right from the get-go? I mean, you add difficulties to make them harder for the people who want to challenge themselves. You don't just say your default is fuck you mode, and then we're going to add in a pussy mode just for you guys who suck.
I would tend to agree. I don't think the game should be mocking you unless the game is purposely trying to mock you in jest as part of its design. Like, I Want to Be the Guy is kind of poking fun at you, but it's kind of poking fun at itself at the same time. But yeah, the easy mode shouldn't be a whole, oh, sorry, Mr. Casual Gamer, you can't handle this level, whereas here's You're an Idiot mode, where we brand the screen with a You're an Idiot watermark, and that is how you have to play the whole game. Yeah, I'm not saying people have to be insulted by their games. Their games should not be bullying them, because, games are a way of escaping the difficulties of life, which has no difficulty selector.
Tier.
Got all philosophical up in here. But I think the idea that if a game subtly says, hey, you want to make this easier, and it gives you the option to do so when you die, I don't think that's bad in and of itself, as long as it's not patronizing you with it and doing it automatically.
I've never heard of a game that does it automatic. Every Ninja Gaiden feature that does that blatantly after 5 times upon dying in a specific area or a specific checkpoint brings you to a screen that says, and it doesn't even say it in a way that is like, you suck, you should change the difficulty. Like, it tells you, would you like to change the difficulty to Ninja Dog mode? And it just asks you, and it defaults to no. Your cursor's automatically on no. So it's not like it's telling you, you should definitely do this. So it's like, I just want to press X, I want to get back in the game, hit yes by accident. It defaults to no and lets you choose. So, I don't know if Devil May Cry does that too. I think that it does, but I don't think I've ever lost that many times where I've seen that screen, but if it does, I'm sure that it does the same thing.
Doesn't Resident Evil 4 subtly and without telling you decrease your difficulty? I thought it did.
I'm not sure. I've never noticed that.
I've never heard of it.
Dave, you're the Resident Evil 4 expert, pun intended.
On that one, I can't really say, because I didn't have a hard time with the game.
You know why? Because every time you died, the game difficulty got lowered and never told you.
Did it seriously do that?
No, I doubt it. I don't think that is a feature of Resident Evil 4.
I could have sworn that I read an article somewhere that talked about game difficulty and how that game handled it. It might have been a different Resident Evil or a different Capcom game, but I thought that was perhaps the game that did it. But we're getting slightly away from the basis of our topic, and that's games you personally wish were easier or harder. Perhaps I'll start to get us kicked off here. I like Castle Crashers. I think Castle Crashers is a fun little side-scrolling beat-em-up, although it got kind of boring pretty quickly, I will admit. That said, the difficulty jump between its normal mode and its hard mode is enormous, especially for a person playing it solo, and I really wish there was some in-between difficulty in between those two extremes. I wish there was an easier Battletoads other than Battletoads Double Dragon.
I feel that. I recently played Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, the game, the side-scrolling beat-em-up. And again, that is another game where if you play it it's meant to be played multiplayer, but if you play it by yourself, it is crushingly difficult. Crushingly, even on its hardest setting. Easiest setting, I'm sorry. It is ridiculously difficult because it's basically designed around the fact that you have someone, if you get knocked down, you can have someone help you get picked up faster. Someone can help block attacks for you or interrupt enemy combos and stuff like that. And if you don't have that, then you're just going to get juggled all day, and you're just going to see your health go away.
I would have thought that game would have been difficult playing solo because it would have just bored you to death.
You didn't like Scott Pilgrim vs. the World?
I played about halfway through the first level, and then I asked David if he could please kill me.
Oh, wow.
I like Scott Pilgrim.
I didn't have my dagger nearby.
You took a swing, I remember.
No, I didn't. I wouldn't have missed.
No, I take that as a challenge. If we were in the same room, we would be
You'd be
fighting
dead.
right about now. Speaking of extremely difficult tasks that you couldn't possibly do, Dave, what about you? Games you wanted to be easier or harder?
A hard one for me because I don't find many games truly hard unless they're poorly designed. I mean, maybe easier combos like Legend of Dragoon, but really there's no, other than stupidly made to be that way games like Dark Souls and the like, I don't really need any games to be harder. Challenging is good. It's just when the game is stacked so far against you that I really have a complaint.
You're saying you wouldn't welcome a harder Chrono Trigger?
Whatever.
Or a Chrono Trigger with difficulty settings?
You're going off the basis I want the game again. I played through it, I got the storyline, I don't want to go back.
Yeah, but you occasionally get an inkling to go play an old RPG. No doubt you have encountered some that have been just way too simple.
Or what about older Final Fantasy, since you're mentioning easy RPGs? I know, Richie, you've played Final Fantasies and you've said they were pretty easy.
Most tend to be pretty easy. I think that the hardest one I've ever played had to be 12 was kind of difficult, only because I feel like I couldn't grasp the gambit system all that well. Like, I just didn't set up my gambit builds all that well. Not to mention, I hate 12. Like,
12
I hate
12 is
12
garbage.
I hated 12, but I played through it because it was Final Fantasy, and I was like, yay, Final Fantasy! So I played it. And that was when I thought that Final Fantasy could do no wrong. That is a premium of a Final Fantasy. I thought it was hard, but then again, that also was not a Final Fantasy game. So, moving on.
Hey, here's how we should do it. We should make a macro system for this real-time combat system, right? And then the other guy's like, go on. And then the first guy's like, okay, but get this. Instead of being able to configure your macros, you have to unlock macro components so that your guys act like retarded monkeys for half the game. And then the other guy's like, brilliant! What the hell was that?
Anyway.
Jeez. Excellent mumble. What was I about to say? The 12 would be nice if it was easier, only because, well, this is one of those games that was difficult because it was designed to need you to grind. And fuck that.
Mm-hmm.
But having seen Spoonie's latest review on Final Fantasy XIII, the first two parts are out as of the time of this recording, he does talk about how the hallway has enemies planned to the last detail so that you're always at the level you need to be for the boss. So maybe that was Square's overreacting to Final Fantasy XII. They're like, oh, okay, you don't want to grind? Fine, we're going to make it so that every encounter is invariant and therefore will never require any kind of thought on your part.
That
stop you,
played
Carlos.
itself.
That would require planning. Second of all, the hallway didn't stop the grinding. You just went back and forth to grind out your sphere grid. So it was no less of a grinding game than 12.
Well,
In fact, I'd say it was worse.
Christ.
Honestly, that is true. You would have to grind to fill out your sphere grid, especially once you unlocked spheres for all of your characters, so that they could be whatever paradigm they wanted, and then you would have to go back and do that. But honestly, what I think Carlos was trying to say is that the game never required you to do that. If you wanted to be at your optimal best or wanted something exact, you could go back and do it. But the game never required you to do it. You could move on by fighting just what was in the hallways, just running straight through, and beat it with the bare minimum.
Huh, I didn't know you could backtrack just enough to fight enemies over in a specific area.
But yes, if you wanted to grind, it was definitely there.
I know a game that could be made harder. Kirby Superstar. I know that's another older RPG, but I was sitting here thinking and pondering about it as you guys were talking about 13. That game I felt was retardedly easy. Like, I remember Popo bought me the Superstar so we could play together on the DS, and I literally fell asleep playing it again because I was just so bored on how easy it was. It was ridiculous.
Kirby games tend to be really, really easy, though. Yes, I think that's one of their, that's something that Sakurai wants. Sakurai loves his easy games, basically. He doesn't want to be terribly offensive to the kiddies he thinks plays Kirby, so that's going to be a perpetual issue in Kirby, but I do agree, I wish there was a hard mode. And a hard mode that's more than just, oh, here's a mode where you have half-life, but the rest of the game is exactly the same.
On the topic of kid games, or what is, I'm going to say, I wish Pokemon games single players were harder.
Miltank.
But in general.
We can never forget that Miltank.
Like, in general, I wish that Pokemon single-player games were harder. Yes, I understand that the purpose of Pokemon is that we play multiplayer and the difficulty comes from the opponent that you're facing. But not all the time are we always going to have an opponent, even with the new ways that Pokemon has been introducing online play and ghost battles and whatever the hell have you. I've always said, I don't care if your gyms have one element Pokemon. There are so many Pokemon in this game that have multiple elements that you don't... Why can't you be more like the final battle?
Hey guys.
And less like Earth only.
Hey guys. Okay, I have a great idea for the Pokemon we can give Drake at the end of Gold and Silver, okay? Let's give him 3 Dragonites.
And nothing else.
And nothing else. No, he also had a Charizard and 2 other dragons.
No, he had a Gyarados and an Aerodactyl.
Whatever.
They could have varied that shit up, though.
He had 3 Dragonites.
Sounds legit.
That seems legit. I have 6 Alakazams. I am a psychic trainer.
That's why it was pretty funny when in the Gold Silver or Heart Gold Soul Silver, when you went to Viridian again and you fought Gary, he actually had a balanced team to fuck you over.
See, that's the thing. Part of the reason Pokemon is so easy is because it's kind of the RPG thing. Unless they do what Final Fantasy VIII did and scale guys to you, and even 8 could have done that better, you're always going to be able to, through attrition, outlevel guys. The other thing is that since the gyms were all one element, you could find its natural counters and just stock your team. So whenever you had a trainer like Gary, who would bring a balanced team to the mix, he would throw a monkey wrench in that, and you actually had to think. Or if the one element was steel, in that it has 18 bazillion resistances, and despite all being one element, you're still in for a hell of a fight, like the final boss of Ruby and Sapphire.
Yeah, but what Richie was saying was true too. Like, there's so many different water Pokemon. For Misty's case, she could have varied up that water team. Like, there's like water grass or water electric or something. Like, she didn't have to have just pure water.
No, she has to use pure water because that's how the cartoon does it. If you have water, you need to use water.
and yeah, that's the thing. The cartoon bent all the rules, right? Like when Blaine beat water Pokemon with his fire Pokemon all the time because he was able to overpower their water. I'm like, bullshit. Paper, rock, scissors doesn't work that way, asshole.
His world it does.
In his world it does, totally. I definitely agree. Like Misty, she could have a pure water type. She could have Empoleon, which is water steel. She could have one of the water ground types on her team, a water psychic. And even though someone with an electric Pokemon can kind of clean house, or a grass Pokemon would be even better, she could still, the CPU should still plan around that. Like, her water Pokemon should have, should have ground beating attacks, and they should have electric beating attacks, and they should have counters to their counters. And if the trainers were smart and the game programmers smart, they would teach you those lessons. Like, because when you go to the Pokemon simulators or you go to competitive Pokemon battling, you see a very deep game there, albeit much like every other Nintendo game that ends up going that way, like Smash Brothers. It's because of a lot of user community rules. But if you strip away all the bullshit, there's actually a deep and fun battle system here. It's just mired with all this bullshit, and Nintendo never takes advantage of it. The games should teach you that just because you're facing a Pokemon that you beat doesn't mean they might not have Ice Punch to ruin your day, right? Like, that's something the games should teach, and they don't. And that's kind of You have to learn that from the community, which is good in its own way, but the CPU should definitely be kind of helping you along there.
Indeed. Okay. What other games?
Indeed. So feel free, people, to chime in with games you wish were easier and harder, or why. Or we can move on to our next topic.
I got one myself. I kind of, even though this was fixed in like the PSP version of the game, I'm going to go with, I wish Persona 3 for the PlayStation 2 was easier. And not just saying because compared to Persona 4, Persona 3 was actually a lot harder. It's because, like, not having any sort of control over your teammates at all, it was actually very aggravating for some fights when you only had one person to control, while the other characters were, even if when you set them to, like, specific command sets, like telling them to either act freely or be defensive or go all out, sometimes they'll just do stupid mistakes. And that cost me the final boss fight, which final boss fights shouldn't have 13 different phases, each with its own separate mechanic and weaknesses and resistances. Because of that little setback, I just can't bring myself to play that game again.
Yeah, I normally trust almost everything that Atlas has been putting out recently, but even I admit, Persona 3... And the worst part was they did not give you any control over your three party mates, yet they didn't build the game's difficulty around that at all. They expected you to still fight according to how difficult the game would be. And it was a fairly difficult game from both the standpoint of, wow, these enemies do a lot of damage when they hit your whole party. Oh, wow, this is kind of difficult to get through. And the fact that you couldn't have direct control. You could give them orders, but they're not reliable. It was giving them a direct command.
So what I've just heard for the past couple minutes here is wah 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 wah.
Here we go. Hold on, wait. I want to hear this. Go ahead.
I'm gonna reference a game, and actually, friend of the show, Rowan. I said that right, didn't I, Carlos?
Yes, you did, Dave.
Wow, got it right for once. Rowan just recently played Dragon Quest IV, released for the DS. And we had a very interesting conversation around the Dragon Quest games, but Dragon Quest IV, throughout the first number of chapters, you controlled one of your characters, or two if that's what the chapter was, but your third and possibly fourth character was never, ever controlled by you. You get to the final chapter where it's sort of a bring everybody together sort of thing, and that's all that game was one giant, you control the main character, your other three do everything, and that game was so horribly unbalanced when it came to the final characters that you kind of had to build your main hero to be your healer, attacker, everything else. The most you could tell them to do is to hold back on using magic or to go all out. It made the game frustrating, but it wasn't insurmountable. You had to actually plan everything around the fact that your secondary characters could be complete and utter idiots. It was part of the actual challenge of the game, I always felt. Now, that being said, just to be fair, I have not played Persona 3 yet. I just got myself a Vita, so I'm playing through Persona 4 right now. But, yeah, they planned around that. If they didn't actually plan for the difficulty spike, there's probably more there than just the challenges from not controlling your other characters.
To answer you there, Dave, yeah, you can definitely make a game where you have to plan around your other party members' stupidity, I guess, and that might be a fun game mechanic. In fact, spoiler alert, one of my design documents has something to do with that. But I still wouldn't want your party members to act stupid out of tradition or because the AI sucks. Like, okay, so they want to design the game around you have direct control over your main guy, but not your other guys. Okay, I'm fine with that. But if I shout attack, I expect them not to hit the fire elemental with lava bomb.
Yeah, right. I know what you mean. Like, I definitely would have wanted that for Persona 3 as well. 4 actually defaults your characters, your party members, to also act on their own. You actually have to manually set it to have direct control over them. Which is obviously something that I did in a second, having played through 3 first. But it's like, I felt like that would have been better. Like, if you want to give yourself that challenge, maybe you could have a difficulty setting where you couldn't have direct control, just to challenge yourself and then have to plan around it. But if your AI is not going to be smart enough, if it's not going to adapt to the situations that the fights are going through, like using Persona as an example, enemies have like elemental weaknesses. If you hit their elemental weakness, your character gets to go again. So they wouldn't plan around this. In Persona 3, you find out their weakness, and it's like a 50-50% chance. You ask them, go for their weaknesses. Okay, lightning on the lightning weakness. Okay, wonderful. Next, lightning on the water weakness. On the ice weakness. What the hell did you just do? Knock the other one down. What's wrong with you?
Yeah, and that's the thing. The AI has to be smart enough. Or, I don't know, AI could be attached to an accessory, an AI ring that gives awesome stat boosts, but makes your guy an idiot. Indeed. So, have we talked about games that we wish were easier or harder to everyone's satisfaction? Shall we move on to game packaging?
Attack or Stay.
Attack or Stay. Yes! Tales of Symphonia 2. Attack or Stay. That game was too easy.
Tales of Symphonia 2. It was too easy to ignore because of its shitty Wiimote nunchuck bullshit.
Actually, you didn't even really waggle to do anything. It was completely...
That's even more reason why I shouldn't have had to use that scheme.
Richie, don't forget how Gina was absolutely pointless to use because of her extra skill.
Oh my god, they gave one of the best characters from the original an ability that forces you to lose a percentage of gold just for having her in your party.
Who?
Sheena.
So
they gave her an extra skill.
Characters?
They gave her an extra skill called I think it was like Misfortune or Bad Fortune or something like that, because they kept on pulling off the fact that, they kept on surmounting on the fact that she was clumsy in Symphonia 1, I guess. So basically, every time you use her in combat, you will earn like 10% less gold than you would have made just for having her in your party, and she has no other stats to like offset that other than her Sheena-ness.
Yep.
Sheena was clumsy?
Apparently,
because she kept on falling the first time she met Lloyd and stuff like that, or whatever, or fell down the chute when they were trying to set up the trap, or whatever.
Yeah, but she was getting moist over Lloyd. She was all hot in the crotch. I thought that's why. I thought that's why she was falling over all the time.
That's what I thought.
Perhaps, but fucking, it's anime, so you gotta take that into consideration.
She's a ninja.
Exactly. So she apparently is awful and clumsy, and you lose 10% of gold if
And she wasn't Beverly Hills Ninja either. She was using a highly complex fighting style involving control of paper with your key. Like, what? She was not clumsy? Oh, Jesus fucking Christ. I'm clumsy, teehee.
And what does clumsy have anything to do with losing gold? Like, what? That would mean that you trip in the middle of fights, like brawl style.
Drop your shillings.
She's hitting guys too hard, so they're dropping their gold in the river nearby. So unless you're fighting away from the rivers, you're gonna lose gold.
All right, we need to move on to the next topic because now we're way off.
No, you know what? This needs to be resolved. Sheena is not clumsy. She was hot and bothered because Lloyd made her like Lloyd turned on her maternal instincts and wanted eggs, fertilization, more gross things. And the issue there is that's why she was all like, you know, putzing around. And even in the second game when... Hey folks, Carlos here. Turns out that the mumble recording, well, it's kind of a funny story. I tried to record it with an output of WAVE, and the recording feature wouldn't quit out, and it was eating up my laptop's puny hard drive space like Garfield eating drugged lasagna. The issue there is that I had to do some trickery to salvage what was still salvageable in that giant 90 gig WAV file, which all said and done compressed down to like 170 meg AIFF file, which is no doubt an even smaller MP3. And that, I'm afraid, is the end of that episode that my dumb ass lost half of. Listen to some snippets and doodads. Enjoy.
Oh, that's hilarious. Fallout 3. In Japan, the player no longer has the opportunity to detonate the nuclear bomb.
That one I remember. Makes it harder to go bad.
And they renamed the Fat Man nuke launcher. It was renamed Nuka Launcher because Fat Man was the code name of the atomic bomb that fell in Nagasaki.
That's why the Fat Man bomb that Peacock sends out is called Fat Man. It used to be called Fat Man.
Really?
Yeah. So they changed the names because they wanted Skullgirls to be a hit in Japan. Hopefully that arcade version comes out soon.
Any more information on that?
The arcade version of Skullgirls for Japan?
Yeah.
Nothing yet.
Genetically engineering babies a moral obligation.
Yeah, I think it is. People don't have to go through dangerous pregnancies, and we can help populations in areas...
Not clones.
I know what you're talking about. And we can help population control in areas where we're forecasting population declines. I think it's more immoral to call it immoral and not allow it to happen.
I think we can both agree that Super NES was the system to have for RPGs.
Probably.
PlayStation 1, PlayStation 2 were RPG systems, and the PlayStation 3. Xbox really didn't get too many.
Modern RPGs are shitty anyway, so who cares?
Some people still do.
They shouldn't, because they're shitty. Are you still recording?
Yes.
You're gonna have this... It's gonna be this giant file, man!
So?
We have enough for the snippets. Most of it's getting deleted anyway, you're just making more work. I would punch you in the penis. Yeah, you see what's happening? Your system's fucking up now. See what you do, Dave?
So, if you've liked what you heard, you want to leave us some feedback, you want to give us some criticism, whatever, our podcast site is tfgtg.blogspot.com, where you can also find the feed link and our YouTube channel.
You can also find us on Twitter at tfgtg. Yeah. There's no way to continue that. So
There's no way to continue that sentence.
Please leave us some feedback. We accept good and bad. We will usually respond, seeing as we have such a small group audience.
We do have thousands of millions of followers, so we might not respond to you right away.
Sure, let's go with that.